When it comes to buying DJ equipment, many people don't know where to start. So I guess you need to first consider your goals and your budget. Now, it is important to understand though that all DJ equipment shares the same basic operations, but some of the cheaper models do feel like toys, and even though they're portable, they're a great starting point. At least you're playing, you're behind the decks, right? But you may find out with some of the cheaper stuff that you outgrow them in a short period of time and you end up upgrading anyway. So it is said, right, buy cheap, buy twice. So if you are into DJing or you feel, DJing is something you really want to do, perhaps it's worth spending a little bit more, as not only do the more expensive units have more advanced features, right, that you can grow into, like 4 decks and heaps of stuff. Actually, I'll talk about it now, but they also have more powerful sound cards, which means you can play them loud without compromising sound quality. So you could run your own parties with the more expensive gear. They're really cool. So how much do you personally need to spend to get something decent? Now, before I give you advice for the best gear for your goals and your budget, I feel we should first of all put DJ gear into 3 separate categories. So number 1, you have all-in-one controllers. Then number 2, standalones. And number 3, club equipment. Now, the all-in-one controllers are by far the cheapest, and that's because unlike the standalones and the club equipment, they don't have inbuilt screens on them. So what happens if ever you see equipment without an inbuilt screen, that means to work and load your songs, you need to connect your controller to your computer, and the computer becomes the screen, which makes it a lot cheaper, right? So this means the controller essentially controls the DJ software on your computer. So look at it this way. Let's say you don't have DJ gear yet and you've been fooling around with DJ software on your computer. Now, in a very short period of time, you're going to find it's very limiting crossfading between the songs just simply using your trackpad or your mouse, right? But with a controller, it opens up another world. So you got EQ, like where you use 2 hands, so EQ work, effects, looping, and so much more. And so the controller really brings the capabilities of your software to life. Okay, so then you have also the standalones, which basically means they've got inbuilt screens so you can load your music and jam without even connecting a computer, which is also really cool. So what it means is you've got an inbuilt screen. It means you can use your DJ software on your computer to prepare your music, export that music onto a USB stick, and then put the USB into the gear and play directly from the gear. Now, the Denon standalones even allow you to connect to Wi-Fi, stream music directly onto the players, which is honestly really cool. And without a doubt, if you can afford it, standalones are an amazing choice for DJs, and you could easily run your own events and parties with a standalone, as most of them model the club layout anyway, and they work in exactly the same way. So then, lastly, you have the club equipment. Now with the club equipment, you have 3 separate pieces, so 2 decks and a mixer in the middle, and you connect it all with an RCA cable, and each has their own power supply. So this is where it starts getting a little bit more expensive though, and a club setup could easily cost you, well, over $5,000, I'd say. So now that we know the different types of gear, the next thing to consider is the software that's used to run the gear. Now, then after that, I'm going to talk about brands, and then I'll share the main models and features for each price point, okay? So DJ software is the software you use on your computer to prepare the music for playback, and what DJ software you use will depend on the type of gear that you have or the type of gear that you're buying. So you've got to keep these things in mind, they work hand in hand. So for instance, if you're using Pioneer, then they have 2 softwares. So they have Serato or Rekordbox. Now Serato, it's been around forever. I've got a lot of experience with Serato, and honestly, if you're playing functions at private parties using a controller, Serato is a really good option. But let's say you want to play in clubs and be able to export your music onto a USB for club use, then you have to use Rekordbox. Like, the club gear isn't compatible with Serato. So the good news is, right, there are a ton of Rekordbox controllers and standalones to choose from. And the advantage of using something that reads Rekordbox software is you can then export your music to USB and turn up on and play on any Pioneer club system. And all Pioneer gear, it's got a very similar layout, so making the jump from a Rekordbox controller to a Rekordbox standalone to Rekordbox club gear is honestly way easier than you think. But then you have the new boy on the hood, and that's Denon. Now, Denon's made a massive splash in recent years and introduced gear that's as good, and many say way better, than Pioneer. and they seem to have their sights on being the industry standard, it seems. So I'll be honest, right? It's very hard to overlook Denon. And the only thing that doesn't make Denon the clear choice is that, love it or hate it, Pioneer is the industry standard right now and has been for 20 years. And if you have any intention of playing in clubs post-COVID, then the chances are the venue will have Pioneer equipment there. And they're probably going to expect you to use what they have, like what they've got. Now, sure, you could always take in your own equipment, right? But unless you're playing all night, right? Honestly, taking your own gear can sometimes make things a little bit difficult, and it can be a little bit fiddly, right? See, already, like when you come on and you're playing between DJs on the lineup, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. And if you're plugging and unplugging in your equipment around other DJs, it can be messy. And honestly, unless you've got influence in the scene, meaning you're responsible for the venue's main source of income, man, to be honest, they might not like that, okay? And it may be easier for you to turn up with a USB that you've prepared using Rekordbox and simply use their equipment, which means preparing your music in Rekordbox, which may mean buying like gear that's compatible with Rekordbox may be your best option. But otherwise, let's say you did buy Denon gear and you have to play on Pioneer gear. Well, it's just going to involve preparing your music a second time in Rekordbox. It's the club gear right now is Pioneer, and Rekordbox is the software used to prepare your music so it loads properly onto the club gear with all the metadata like cue points and all the saved information. But here's the thing. One small thing to note, Denon actually reads Rekordbox, okay? So meaning, if you're prepared your music in Rekordbox, you could play it through Denon gear, but not vice versa. So I guess in that way, you could compare Pioneer to Mac. So Pioneer have their own ecosystem and they want you to strictly use Pioneer and nothing else, okay? As Denon are making it more accessible for people using other software to jump across to Denon by allowing their software to integrate with, like, you know, Rekordbox, Traktor, Serato, all the main ones. So here's the thing though, if you have no intention of playing in clubs or think to yourself you'll cross that bridge when you come to it, then really there isn't any reason not to buy Denon, as they're 100% the flavor of the year. People love them, they're huge. It's really, they're really popular among new DJs. And honestly, keep watching as I'm about to jump into the actual gear breakdowns and what's the best gear around right now. But just quickly before I do, Traktor and Virtual DJ 100% deserve a mention, as these are both very strong brands in the DJ world. And if you're using a Virtual DJ or Traktor controller or considering buying Traktor or Virtual DJ, then you can't go wrong, as these also have earned a place among the best. Okay, so now that we know about the different types of gear, the different types of software used to operate that gear or prepare the music for the gear, and the different brands, what would I personally get? Please understand, if I went into all the gear on the market, then this video would be way too long, right? It's already kind of long, but so how about I just mention my top picks that I know people love and picks that you could definitely not go wrong with. And then it's up to you to go with what resonates most for you, okay? And what resonates most for you may not be what resonates for other people, so it's completely your choice. But everything I'm about to mention is good. Okay, controllers. So for under $300 US, without a doubt, I would go for the DDJ 400. So the DDJ 400, it's a Rekordbox controller and it has the same layout and basic operations as the club gear. But what makes it so affordable is it's actually quite small. It feels a little bit like a toy, and the sound card isn't very powerful, which means when you're turning the EQ, there's not a lot of sensitivity there, and kind of like a cheap speaker, I may not be able to push it that loud, like loud enough to play at significant size parties. But if learning to DJ, or even if seeing if DJing is for you or not, then there's no reason why you couldn't become a wizard behind the decks using the DDJ 400. And I know personally a ton of really good DJs that started on these. So think of it this way, right? The first car you buy may be a shitbox, and when you upgrade and buy something decent, it's not like you need to relearn how to drive. So yes, you could DJ with the 400, and when you hit more expensive decks, you could still outperform other DJs with more expensive gear. It's not the gear that matters, it's about you bringing the gear to life. Now, I also know Serato have their own version of the DDJ 400 called the SB3, and even though it's ultimately the exact same piece of equipment, it only comes with a light version of Serato, which means you'd have to pay more to use Serato Pro, which unlocks the SB3's full potential, as when you buy the DDJ 400, you're going to get access to all Rekordbox features. Then moving up the price range a little bit, you have for around 800 US, there's the DDJ 800, which honestly, it adds more performance features. It feels so much better than the 400. I guess it's just larger. There's more options and stuff really. But and let's say you're a parent, okay, and you want to get your kids something semi-decent, then honestly, the DDJ 800 is a great choice. But personally, if you're already moving up in price range, then I personally feel the best controller on the market that mirrors and feels like club equipment is the DDJ 1000. Now again, it's a Rekordbox controller, but it has the same feel and layout as the club gear. And what makes the 800 and 1000 unique is they're the first controllers of their kind that show the waveform and track information inside the jog wheels. So you're still going to need a computer though to load your tracks onto the gear. But once you load each track onto each deck, right, you can see where you are in the song inside the jog wheels, which is great because it means I'm not staring at my computer the whole time. I only use my computer to load the songs, okay? But personally, what I love most about the DDJ 1000 is you have full-size jog wheels, what you're going to find in the clubs, right? Like the exact same jog wheels. And it also has 4 channels like in the club. So it means I can actually play 4 tracks at the same time, which is insane. It's something you can grow into. It's a lot of fun. Now, but here's the thing. For around the same price as the DDJ 1000, you have the Denon Prime Go. Now the Prime Go, it's a lot more compact than the DDJ 1000, but if you want something that's portable, you can't go wrong with the Denon Go. See, you can stream music directly onto it, so you don't need a computer. It has a lithium battery, which means you can charge it and literally take it anywhere, hence why it's called the Go, right? But you can also play music from USB, SD card, it's got a 7-inch HD screen, and all in all, the Go is insane. And if you're on the go and want to prepare sets on the go, but if you want that, you know, that's great, right? But if you do want something that feels a little bigger, then for around that same price, like perhaps $100 or $200 more, it is hard to look past the DDJ 1000. But again, it really depends on what you plan to use the gear for. So that's around, the 1000 is about $1,000, probably roughly. The Go is roughly about the same. So now, the standalones. Now this is where Denon really starts to pull ahead of the competition. So let's start with the 2-channel standalones. Okay, that means you got the decks on either side, it's all in one, and 2-channel mixer in the middle. Now, in my opinion, there are 2 leaders of the pack here. The XDJ-RX2 by Pioneer and the Denon Prime 2, and both of these are about 1,500 US. But again, the XDJ-RX2 may be a couple of $100 more depending on where you're from. Now, at a glance, they look almost identical, but the big difference is that the Denon has a bigger and better screen with multi-touch capabilities, meaning it kind of feels like an iPad, which is pretty awesome. And another standout for Denon is you can connect to Wi-Fi and stream directly onto the equipment. And Denon has also, it's got inbuilt hard drives, meaning you can store music directly onto the players, which is huge. Plus, Denon has the ability to analyze tracks directly on the gear, as when using Rekordbox, you're going to need to analyze your tracks in advance using Rekordbox. Now, to many people, right, it does seem like Denon is the obvious choice here, as it 100% has more features, and it's most likely a couple of $100 cheaper than Pioneer's equivalent 2-channel standalone. But honestly, I do know a ton of people that swear by the XDJ-RX2, they love it, and vice versa, people that love the Prime 2. And my personal thoughts would be, they're both awesome, okay? And honestly, just go with what looks and feels right for you, like depends on what you need it for. So there's no right or wrong, both are very powerful and loved by many. However, if you feel you want to stream music and store music or even analyze music as you go, then Denon 100%. But if you're happy to prepare your music in advance using DJ software and you're used to Pioneer, then honestly, Pioneer's just as good. Like, well, if you don't want the streaming and all that, okay? So anyway, however, if I was you though, and you could afford a little bit more money, I would honestly opt for a 4-channel standalone. And this is where you have Pioneer's XDJ XZ for roughly $2,300 US, and Denon's Prime 4 for approximately $1,700 US. Now, I'll be honest, both again look amazing. And the XZ from Pioneer, they've upped their screen power with a full colored 7-inch touchscreen. But the Prime 4 not only has all the features the Prime 2 has, so inbuilt storage and Wi-Fi capabilities, but it has a tablet-sized 10-inch screen where you can see clearly all 4 waveforms at the same time, which is really handy when mixing with more than 2 channels. So personally, for those buying around the 2000 mark, Prime 4 seems to be the obvious winner here when it comes to 4-channel standalones, as the Prime 4 does have more value for money and you're getting more features. And the only real reason you go for the Pioneer in this case is because you're used to Pioneer, you already have all your music set up in rekordbox, and you like the feel of Pioneer gear. And maybe you don't, you're not interested in Denon's fancy features, and in which case, honestly, the XZ, it is amazing and it shares many of the same features as the Nexus setups you're going to find in most clubs these days. It has full-size jog wheels, 4-channel mixer, and it looks and feels like club gear, it really does. So if you have a single-minded focus to playing clubs and you want to prepare for clubs, in which case staying with the Pioneer and rekordbox ecosystem may honestly be your best choice. And let's say you were running your own events, the XZ, man, could honestly, it could hold its own against any club setup. Like, it really is powerful, man. Like, I love it. Like, it's good. But again, the Prime 4, also really cool. Comes down to personal preference. It really does. What feels right to you. Now, for those of you willing to go out, let's look at club equipment, or to be more accurate, like 2 decks, right, and a mixer, okay? Now, in most clubs these days, you're probably gonna find at this stage of life, like Pioneer, the CDJ 2000s, the 2000 Nexus, or ideally the 2000 Nexus 2s, with most likely a DJM 900 Nexus or Nexus 2 in the middle mixer. Now, sure, having this exact same setup would be awesome, but at roughly $2,200 US per piece, you could be looking at $7K for a full setup, right? But if you wanted to also then add a few $100s, right, to each player there, you could probably get Pioneer's latest release, the CDJ 3000s. But again, big money, right? But the advantage is you have a club set up in your home and you could easily run your own events and parties. And many would say that the Pioneer latest releases, right, is second to none. That is if you don't ask the Denon supporters to weigh in. So if you want a Denon club setup, which theoretically does the same thing, but again, with more advanced features like iPad style touchscreens, gestures and all that, ability to stream directly onto the players, but also they have the ability to play 2 tracks per deck. And then you could pick up a Denon club setup for 30% less than the Pioneer gear. So for instance, the Denon SC6000s are about $1,500 US per deck, and the Denon mixer, 4-channel mixer, is about $1,100 US, making their setup at least $2,500 cheaper than the Pioneer gear. And this is where the big debate comes in, and people are asking, why is Pioneer the industry standard when Denon has the better gear at better prices? So if we are talking fancy features, the Denon club gear will basically do what all their standalones do. So the Denon club range also has 10-inch display screens per player. They have performance pads on the actual club gear, right? Which means people can mirror the crazy stuff they can do on their controllers in clubs for the first time. That's huge, right? But without a doubt, my favorite thing about the Denon SC6000s is they act as dual players, meaning I can have 2 tracks playing on each player, meaning my club 2-channel mixer turns into 4 in a way, and I can play 4 tracks simultaneously through 2 players, which is honestly loads of fun. But again, this feature may not be for everyone, and many people argue if using more than 2 decks, they actually would prefer having a 3rd or 4th deck. I'm a little bit like that. But again, if you're buying 3 or 4 Pioneer decks, it's gonna add up, okay? So anyway, so let's jump in just quickly before I give you an overview, but talk a little bit more about Pioneer and their latest release, the CDJ 3000. See, the CDJ 3000, they've upped their screen, and they boast an all-new MPU with specially developed audio components, and in English, it means it's harder, faster, and stronger than ever before. And besides the new hot cue placement under the screen, which has caused a bit of controversy, And, and it's also got this new high-res screen. Many people are saying it's, more of the same from Pioneer. It's not enough, okay? But honestly, that can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. Now, personally, I think the CDJ 3000 looks like a beast, and that's one of the big selling points for Pioneer, and that is they're built to last, and you know what you're going to get. And if I had a pair, man, I'd be stoked. I really would. And in truth, I do love the feel of Pioneer gear, and I find sometimes the big screens are a little bit too much for me, but then again, maybe I'm a little bit old school and I prefer less visuals when mixing. But I do appreciate though that screens on the gear, I feel it's better than connecting a computer. So all in all, there's a lot of really good options here. And if I had to choose between them all, okay, well, it's like being a kid in the candy shop, and I understand many of you, right, may be confused. So where do you start? So at the end of the day, what DJ gear you get depends on your goals and your budget, right? But in my opinion, if you buy something that's Denon, Pioneer, Traktor, Virtual DJ, Serato, right? Honestly, you can't go wrong. These are the heavyweights of the DJ world. And at the end of the day, I would get down to a DJ shop, have a look around, and honestly see what you're drawn to, okay? So if Pioneer though wasn't in all clubs, I probably would lean towards Denon, especially in the middle price range, for instance, from the Denon Prime 2 up to the club gear. But if I was buying my first controller, and I was less than that, I'd probably lean towards the DDJ 400, 800, or ideally the DDJ 1000 if your budget allows it. I guess the advantage of the controllers over the standalones are you can access music directly from your computer, which makes searching for tracks really easy. But then again, to get rid of the computer altogether and play on the standalones actually also feels amazing. And with the computer gone, I can listen more and interact more with my audience as opposed to watching my computer screen the whole time to see what I'm mixing. So personally though, I've always had club equipment. I like the feel of club gear. And if you personally want the feel of club gear, but you can't afford it, right? The DDJ 1000 is the closest thing that you're gonna find to club gear for under 1200 US. I like the 1000 a lot. Now, at the end of the day, right, I suggest that you follow your intuition, okay? So if something keeps you up at night thinking about it, or the idea of something in particular excites you and it feels right for you, then that's the gear you should get. And let's say you buy Denon, but then you get shows in clubs and they expect you to use Pioneer. We'll just cross that bridge when you come to it, okay? So if you read all the comments that people are saying right now, there's a lot of hype, like Denon, for instance, right? And they're very loyal and they're very vocal. And if they make enough noise, you never know. Denon may be the new industry standard sooner than we think. And buying Denon could mean you're at the forefront of a change in DJ history. But then again, right, many people don't think that's possible. So, go with what's right for you. So I personally feel though, gear matters less than you think. And at the end of the day, all DJ gear pretty much does the same thing. And it's the ability to play jamming sets on quality gear that feels right to you that's important. And every piece of equipment I've mentioned in this video, honestly, it's all good stuff. Honestly, it's all worth considering. What do you feel drawn to? Anyway, I hope that's been helpful for you. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Just send me an email or something, or comment. And I'm 100% committed to my students and my school. And hopefully that's been helpful. Yeah, cheers.